the wife was upset. He was liking one of a mutual friend's pictures, but one of them happened to be a bikini picture. And she kind of felt like, well, that kind of crossed the line.
Yeah,
Sure.
I don't like that.
He goes, I like everything she posts. But for whatever reason, that one just felt a little different, which makes sense. But when we talked about it, he's like, yeah, that does kind of look bad or whatever. You just have to talk about that and figure out what that is. But those are all things you need to adjust and figure out.
This is Ryan and Michelle, and welcome to the Celebrate MarriageCast, where we hope to restore and reclaim godly marriages through honest and real conversations.
Welcome. Thank you, listener. Thank you for joining us today and working on your marriage, working on your relationship. We are so glad you're joining us today for episode 60.
Nice.
Right? 60.
Wow.
That's kind of cool.
That's really cool.
We're almost to like retirement age. We're not retiring, but
Five more.
It's kind of cool.
Five more years,
we're getting
five
there.
more episodes.
We have a guest today that I'll talk about in just a minute here. But Ryan, right off the bat here, I want to say happy anniversary, my love.
Oh, thank you. Happy anniversary to you.
Yesterday, 11/11. We got married 11/11/11. So we are now on our 13th year.
Lucky 13.
Yeah, going on 14.
Right. That's right.
Yeah. I feel like it's going really fast.
Yeah.
So happy anniversary, love.
Yeah, you too.
Yeah. So by the time this airs, we will have gotten back from our anniversary getaway. So that's kind of fun. Just getting out of town for the weekend.
Absolutely.
And we used to run marathons over our anniversary. Now we don't really run at the moment, but we just go and just get away, which is great. So, well, today on our show, we are talking about a real, very real and very necessary topic. And we are so glad to have one of our guests and friends of the show back. His name is Tony Boer, and he is a licensed professional counselor and friend of the Celebrate MarriageCast. So welcome back, Tony.
All right, thank you. And I like being a friend. I like coming back.
Yeah.
And
Yep.
touching
Friend
base.
of the show.
Yeah.
Friend of the show is a good title.
It's been a while.
It has been a while.
Somehow it just the weeks went by and it's like, we got to get Tony back. We got to get him back. So
Well, I'm happy to be back. No pressure, but on your anniversary, I liked all those 11s. So you better start thinking, what are you guys going to do on your 11th year?
well, we already had it.
We already had
You've
it.
been married 11 years?
13.
This is
13. Oh,
yeah.
man.
What did we do?
What did you do on the 11th? So it was like 11, 11,
13.
11, 11. A marathon?
I don't know. One year you actually.
No, we were here. We stayed in Sioux Falls
Oh, okay. Did we go to?
because I had broken my leg.
I was gonna say we have had a few kind of
Yeah.
interesting anniversaries during the pandemic. Ryan actually had COVID on our anniversary.
Yep.
Which actually ended up not being that bad because we just had like late nights. We'd wake up and just neither of us would be able to sleep because we were so sore, and we'd watch a show in the middle of the night or just talk, and it was actually kind of the best of times too.
Yeah.
But yeah, our 11th anniversary, Ryan had just broken his leg and was recovering from a pulmonary embolism. So for better or for worse, we took
Right.
the worst part very serious.
Yeah. Was on crutches. I remember we went axe throwing, and I was doing it on one leg.
Did. We stayed at a really nice hotel downtown Sioux Falls.
Yeah.
And that's right. And I think you got a bullseye on
I was
crutches.
crushing it.
Yeah, of course.
And the
Crushing
guy
it.
working was super impressed.
Yeah.
I was impressed too. I
Yeah.
did not get a bullseye and I did not have crushes. So,
Wow. Well, you guys have done a lot of stuff.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
Tony, how's really quick? I have to know. We obviously with Ryan's ACL now, we've not been playing soccer. We miss it. I see that you've now carried your team color into your everyday attire.
Yeah.
The
Good
teal.
job.
How is soccer going?
Soccer is fun and exciting, and I love it. And sometimes it's hard and tricky. So our last season, there's a few old guys like me on the team and a few young guys. And
Older. You're not old.
Yeah.
We got our butts kicked, and we're like, man, maybe we need to go down a level because this is just too hard and too fast. And we talked to the league guy, and he's like, your team got third. You can't go down. Suck it up. I'm like, oh, in a really weird way, I guess we're not as bad as what you feel, right? So I guess the therapy lesson, and there's temporarily you might feel bad, but real life, you're probably okay.
Yeah.
So
it
we're
might just
okay.
be a
Soccer's
season.
okay.
It might just be
Yeah.
a tough season or a tough game, but you know what? Keep your head up. Perspective. Yeah, good lesson in there.
Absolutely.
Awesome. Very cool.
Yeah.
One quick question for me. How are you guys adjusting to dropping your kid off at college. That was the last time I was here. That was kind of
Yep.
that new thing for you. How's that been going? And are you guys ready for her to come back and visit?
What do you want to answer?
You want me to answer?
Yeah, because
Okay.
you just said the other day.
No, this is interesting, and I feel like this is like a whole nother show. So we'll just keep this on the. I think parenting at this age is super hard because like you want to give your kids this freedom to like, hey, you're on your own now, go do things, but yet they still need like guidance.
Yeah.
And so it's kind of this weird like in between of like, okay, you got to figure some stuff out on your own, but yet like you're still asking questions. So it's kind of it's sort of a weird time.
It is a really, we should do that as a topic sometime because just the whole thing of when they're 10, you can say, go to bed and you have to go to bed.
Right.
When they're over 18, all of a sudden it's like a suggestion. I think it'd be a good idea if you got some good sleep.
Yeah.
But you don't have that power
Yes.
anymore. So it feels a little weird. It's
Yeah.
like, I'm offering more advice and suggestions than orders, but it's a weird spot to be in. Absolutely.
Yeah, exactly that. Yes, I think that, and that's what I think Ryan is kind of saying. Like, there are times where it's like you want to kind of speak in, but you're like, well, you're an adult, so you know what? Sometimes you just have to kind of learn things. But yeah, releasing that control and just letting her learn too. And I mean, she's doing great. She's well adjusted.
Absolutely.
She's making really great choices. She's joined a physical therapy club. She has actually found a church down there at her school and has joined a life group. So really surrounding herself with some great people. At the time of this recording, tomorrow will be Halloween, and there were a few like parties happening that, kids are talking about. And she's like, I think my roommate and I are going to host a game night at our dorm. And I'm like, you know what? That's just cool. I'm like, let me send you money for, some money for snacks. That is a really great choice you're making. And I would love to support that. So she's doing great.
Yeah. Yeah.
We're proud of her. So
Awesome.
It's going great. It's,
yeah, thanks for asking.
Absolutely.
Yeah, it's a season of transition still.
Yeah,
but
for sure.
she has that foundation, which I feel like is a great, as parents, it's like we work so hard to lay that foundation. And then it's like just to see that come to fruition. It's like, she has a strong faith. So we see that being lived out.
Yeah, absolutely. Tony, we want to jump in today. And I think, every week we talk about having real, honest conversations. And I think before we start, just want to put a caveat that, I think we are talking about sensitive content today a little bit. And just to make you aware of that, if there's other people listening, that type of thing. But
We're going to get really real.
Yeah, this is going to be a really like real conversation. And, but I think it's so necessary. And we want to talk today about affair-proofing your marriage. Here's the most recent statistics from the American Association of Marriage and Family Therapy says that 20 to 25% of men cheat on their wives or partner, and 10 to 15% of women cheat on their husband or partner.
Wow.
Wow.
Yeah. And adding those up, we were just talking before the show, Ryan, 20 to 25% of men, 10 to 15% of women, you add up those numbers, that means 30 to 40% of marriages.
Yeah. So, Tony, today we really want to dive into this topic and this subject because it's not something that's talked about a lot. And to be honest, it's obviously from the statistics, it's way more prevalent than what we'd all like to believe. Mm-hmm. But we also want to talk about it because couples are struggling with this. Like this is happening, but it doesn't mean that your marriage has to be over. So let's talk about this. Let's get messy because this is a big deal and it's real and we need to talk about it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so let's get real. It is a big problem and it devastates marriages and it's a lot of work. Now, marriages can repair. They can recover. That's one of the things that I get to see in therapy. That's why people are coming to therapy is we recovering from affairs, and they can recover, and they can get better. And sometimes you'll even hear people say, man, it's better than it ever was. Mm-hmm. And that's true, and that can be. but we don't want to have to go through all that pain and that work.
Yeah.
Right. It's the best analogy I have is someone, think of a guy who's smoking, right? And he's smoking all the time, but nobody ever really tells him, stop smoking, stop smoking. He knows, and he's not supposed to smoke. And then he gets lung cancer. He goes to the hospital. The doctor goes, if you ever smoke again, you're going to die. And then the guy quits. Why did it take so long? Well, one, didn't talk about that. But then when it comes to you have to, whether you like it or not, you have to stop now or you're going to do it, then they change. And that's kind of the same thing with affairs. When an affair happens, your marriage gets to this crisis point where you have to ask each other, are we in or are we out? Are we doing this? Right? When that affair gets discovered, are you choosing me or are you choosing the other partner? And couples have to have a really hard talk. And when they have that really hard talk, some marriages fall away. It's like, no, I'm not choosing you. It goes bad. But the other ones go really, yeah, I am choosing you. And then they are all in. And they have to do a ton of work to get there. And part of what I want to do today is talk about, let's have that talk before you get to that crisis point, right? Before that's like, if you do this, you're going to die. If you stay and do this, our marriage is going to end. Let's talk about that ahead of time. It's like, let's have those conversations so it's not quite so crisis and you can build on it because your marriage can get better, right? Whenever you guys know from doing this podcast, whenever you do the hard work, it pays off.
Yeah.
So let's just do the hard work before it's super crisis mode.
Yeah. So good. I'm really excited to talk about these topics. Tony, do you have like certain points or like where do we even start? Where should we start with today's show here?
Well, I want to focus more on affair proofing, how to keep it from happening. But if you're in an affair and you're having an affair, go get some help. It is salvageable, right? There's that messy piece. So many couples, because they don't talk about it, they just talk about it on this periphery. Well, if I ever caught my husband having an affair, I'd end it in a heartbeat. And then they actually find that out, and they're like, oh, I don't want to end it. We have a lot of invested. I want to make it work. And so there's that conflict, and they don't know what to do, and so there's that shame. And so if you're in that spot where you've just discovered that, is go get some help because you can solve it. You can save that. You can make that go better. It's a lot of work. It can get messy, but don't give up. Hopefully we can focus a little more. Let's do the stuff on the front end so that we don't get in that spot. And how do we do some things to make sure we never have to ask those questions? Are we in or are we out?
And just maybe encouragement for our listeners, Tony, then before we dive into, the tips and strategies for how to, affair proof it. If this is a couple's reality right now, can you maybe just breathe in a little life and hope and encouragement? I'm guessing that you've worked with many couples that have had this and then successfully gone through that fire and come out the other side hopefully stronger.
Yeah, if you are in that spot, you just got punched in the gut. You don't know which way's up. And this is true with anything, is don't make any rash decisions, right? Catch your breath. Go get around some safe people and figure out what do we want to do? How do we want to do this next? But you don't want to react because how are you going to feel if you find that out? You're going to be and should be mad and angry and hurt and upset and all these things. Well, those aren't the best times to plan out the future of the rest of your life. And so it's, man, you're going to get gut punched. Don't give up.
Or like gut punched and kicked. And
the gut punch is like the nicest way to do that, right? Yeah.
Right.
And there's this whole big thing of all these emotions going on. Allow yourself just to hurt, right? Just to grieve, just to figure out, I don't know what's going on. And find someone, find a therapist, and then let's start figuring out that process.
Okay, that's great.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So, Tony, we want to jump in here. We got some tips. Yeah. So if as you said, like let's do this work on the front end. So let's jump in. You got some tips for us.
Yeah. So the first tip is the classic marriage thing. Communicate. Right? Shocker there.
That's like the Sunday school answer where you'd always say Jesus,
right? Like, what's the right answer? Jesus. Jesus. What do you do in your marriage? Communication.
All
communication.
Right. Okay.
But is communicate, right? So with communication, you should never tell somebody, if we're going to be talking about like from the opposite sex perspective, right? So if you're with the opposite sex, you should never be telling them something that you haven't already told your spouse, right?
Yeah.
So there's this communication of you better make sure you're communicating with your spouse, because that starts to affair proof. It's like, man, I can't tell this person that, but I'm going to go over here and tell her that. Oh, that's a bad setup. That starts to go down the wrong road.
Are you talking about people? Okay, question right off the cuff here. Are you talking about people of the opposite sex?
Yes.
Specifically, right? So you could have an accountability person of the same sex and maybe just say like, hey, here's some things I'm wrestling with. But the emotional vulnerability that opens up, if I were to go to, a male that I, worked with or whatever and shared like an emotional thing or something where I'm opening my heart up, and Ryan, like, first of all, the emotions just, I think that's a really risky area, but you're saying anything.
Yeah.
Like anything really important.
And
like
I would
Ryan
even make
should
it
know.
that we're talking, most of these rules are going to be about opposite sex, but it's actually the same. Listen to what you just said. Well, could I go talk to my girlfriend about a whole bunch of stuff that I haven't talked to Ryan about? Probably shouldn't.
Sure. Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Now, if you talk to Ryan, then you can go talk to her and get a different perspective or more of that. But you should never be surprised by who she's talking to and what she's talking about. And especially, obviously, with opposite sex. But yeah, I always want you guys to communicate. So as soon as you're like, I don't know if I can tell him this, then I'm going to tell you as a marriage therapist, go run and tell him. Let's go sort it out and figure that out.
Right.
Who knows how it's going to go or what's going to happen, but let's keep that communication going. And so any relationship that you have outside of your marriage should always be secondary, right? It should be first with us.
What do you see? Let's just unpack that more. What does that put in place then? What actually happens when somebody goes and shares some vulnerability with someone of the opposite sex or the same sex? What happens in those instances? What do you see happening?
Yeah, you start to make connections with that person, right? Intimacy is simply shared feelings, right? You can share that through sex. You can share that through talking. You can share that. But it's when you're sharing those feelings, that's intimacy. It's on different levels. All marriages kind of go like this. We're close, we're far, we're close, we're far. Affairs happen when you're like that, right? And so if you're sharing these feelings with someone else, that just makes it risky, right? Is you're having intimate conversations. And when I say intimate, what I mean by that is you're having feelings that you're sharing with another person. That builds a connection.
We've said here, intimacy, we've said this at our church, intimacy is in to me, you see.
Yes.
So being vulnerable with the other person.
So that's risky when you're doing that with other people, because that can get misconstrued. That can cause for messes. That can cause all kinds of problems. And that's where you have to be careful.
No, go ahead.
So I'm just wondering, is this more common? Because I feel like I've seen this or heard about it with females where maybe at home their husband might not be attentive or like listening, and they start to, maybe it is somebody at the office place that's like, oh, so-and-so's a good listener. And it seems like it could be a slippery slope where they just listen. And then it's like all of a sudden they're having all these conversations. And I think exactly what you said is true, that then they start to have that intimate bond, and maybe they didn't even realize that was what was happening, but it's like that slippery slope in that direction. Is it more common with one or the other?
How you show up and how you act. So like you talk about with women, it's going to be a little more intimacy, right? Men, it's going to try to do that more from a physical standpoint and make that connection that way and quicker. And so if you think about it, most people don't set out to have affairs, right? So in that little scenario that you talked about, that, oh, yeah, my husband doesn't really talk to me, but man, this guy, he talks to me pretty cool, and it's going, and you'll hear these words sometimes of like emotional affairs, okay? Yeah. From a therapist perspective, to me, they're all the same. Anywhere where you're spending more time and attention outside of your spouse is an affair, right? Well, we didn't have sex, but I just talk with him and I tell him all kinds of stuff that I can't tell my husband. that's not okay either,
Yeah.
right?
Sure.
And it's you can maybe try and justify that a little bit in your brain, but it doesn't start out that way. So for women, a lot of times it's like, well, we're talking, we're sharing. This is just a guy that he's fun to talk with, and he understands me, and he goes, okay, and then that keeps going and growing, and pretty soon there's this connection here that you didn't even set out to have, but
Right.
it's kind of there.
Yeah.
Men
Yeah.
will do that a little bit different, right? They'll be like, hey, they're looking for that attention and to feel valuable and important from that perspective. And so
Sure.
we get validated more that way. So that's where it tends to be a little more physical, quicker with men.
Yeah. Makes sense.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think, Tony, as you're talking, like it's like that spark, it's like a spark that creates something bigger. It starts super small. It's something like you may not think about it, but it's or planting that seed that just continues to grow. And I it seems like it might be something so small, but it's opening that door just a little bit.
Yeah, and just being really intentional, right? If we just talk about 30 to 40% of people are having affairs. I've had these people in my office, and when you ask them, so why did you have an affair? Almost always they go, well, I never meant to.
Yeah.
Wow.
I wasn't planning to, right? It's like, oh, I just started doing this. It's the slippery slope. And all of a sudden, whoa, we were in it.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so when you talk about that spark when you talk about affair proofing is, hey, let's pay attention to all those things and put up some guardrails and pay attention to that so we know what we're doing so that we're not 10 steps down the road and then go, whoa, how did I get here?
Right. Yeah.
Tony, I love that you used the word guardrail. When you said that, that was the first word that popped into my head when you said most people say that they never set out to have that. It's just like, holy smokes, that is all the more reason to have really strong boundaries and guardrails because like it's just like such a slippery slope. If your car starts going over the edge, like that's why you want to have these guardrails up. I think that's a great visual image for our listeners to have in mind is how can you put up these guardrails? So one, we have communication, being really careful about who you're communicating with and who you're being intimate with your words, intimacy. Is there a second tip that you have
the next
for us?
one is no surprises, right? So if you are having conversations with other people, your spouse shouldn't get surprised, right? So if I'm sitting at Starbucks and I'm having a meeting and talking with someone and it's a female and someone goes by and talks to my wife and goes, hey, I saw your husband at Starbucks with so-and-so or with some lady. Her answer shouldn't be, huh? Right? There should be no surprise. Like, oh, yeah, he told me last night he was going to meet with so-and-so and this is what's going on. And so it's just that accountability and that stuff where let's not even let that spark go, right? So that the person doesn't have to go, huh, wonder what was going on. It's like, nah, there's no surprises. And so you should know where you're going and what you're doing. And because you're going to have some of these times where you are going to meet somebody or do someone or have to have a conversation and do that. And if you've communicated and you're not telling them anything that your spouse hasn't already heard and your spouse knows exactly what's happening and going on and isn't surprised by those things, it brings everything down and makes it a little safer.
Yeah, I love this because I think this is a necessary conversation. I see this like, in the world of hey, I'm just having a meeting, like it's just a business meeting, nothing's going on,
Right.
and that it's true, but I think there's something valuing in saying, hey, Michelle, I've got 3 meetings out of the office today. I'm going to meet, it doesn't have to be I'm meeting so-and-so.
Right.
Like, hey, I have a meeting at Starbucks. Like, I have this meeting here. Like, so exactly like where I'm going to be at. And if it's like a confidential thing, you don't have to say the person's name, but just, I think that's something that people justify and like, well, it's just my work. Like, I don't need to do that.
You don't, but think how different it feels when you do it on the front end and you're like, oh, I saw Ryan at Starbucks with so-and-so. Oh, yeah, okay. As opposed to if you didn't. You're going to stay the same thing. As,
right.
Oh, it was just a work meeting. It wasn't that, but it just feels a little different.
Oh,
I feel like
sure,
it
right?
implants even a little sliver of doubt.
Yes.
And you don't want to give Satan a foothold at all to get in that door, right? It just like for a brief second, until you call your spouse or ask them. And then I feel like you would even be kind of like, okay, really? Why wouldn't they have told me? But that's so good. I just had that actually this week. I was emailing one of my board members, and he was like, you know what coffee shop? Because I was like, I just got to a coffee shop, got set up. And he was like, you know what? We all, there's a lot on this list here. Where are you at? Maybe I'll just come over there. And I thought, oh, shoot, I wasn't planning on like meeting someone today. So I thought, well, if this happens, like I'm already in my head, I was like, I'm going to give Ryan a call. Ended up, I was on the other side of town. So he never did. We just did a Google Meet. But in my head, I already was like, oh, like, when I can, I don't meet one-on-one with very, very rarely do I even have those types of meetings. I just bring another board member or have someone with me just so it's not like, I feel like in our city, it's so small and I just don't want that perception. I don't want anyone to walk in and be like, oh, hey, Michelle and Ryan. Oh, that's not Ryan.
Yeah.
Like, I don't even want other people to see that. Sometimes you can, control that. And I get that, but I love this idea of just not giving your spouse that surprise, not even putting a seed of doubt there. And, but yeah, in my head, I was already thinking, oh, if he pops over to this coffee shop, I'm going to just call Ryan and like, let him know.
Shows up, I got to let him know what's going on.
Yeah. I wasn't intending on that. I was like, oh, change of plans and I'll just, that's fine. If that needs to happen, but don't let Ryan know.
Yeah.
So I feel like we do really good at that of just,
Yeah.
you work with a team of females and there'll be times where, not often, but sometimes where you guy and gals will, go to like a team lunch or something and you'll just say like, hey, just, we're going to whatever place for lunch. And I appreciate that.
Yeah, absolutely. Tony, I love what you said. And I think it's, as I'm replaying this, when it's like, it's easier to do on the front end to say than have Michelle, if you came back and somebody had told you they saw me and then like I instantly though, like I'm just playing this out, like you almost go on the defensive, like it was just a work meeting.
You
like,
get defensive and you try to explain it, and everything you're saying at the moment is still all true.
And then I would be like, whoa,
weird.
what the heck? Like, was it a work? Yeah.
And all of that can be avoided on the front end work of saying, hey, just so you know, like, here's where I'm going to be. Here's what time I'm going to be there. I'm meeting this person, or I have a work meeting here. I see such tremendous value in that front end.
So that's the rule of no surprises.
Yeah.
And I think that rule of no surprises should almost tie in with communication. Like, hey, if you are letting your spouse know that you're going somewhere to meet with someone, you also then should not be having any of those, intimate communications with that person.
So Tony, what's the third point we have here?
Last one is you should talk about and communicate your rules. What rules do you have as couples? Some couples have you can never meet with somebody outside of the office of the opposite sex. Other people want to know, yes, we can, but we need to know where. And so you should just sit down and figure out, as a couple, what do you guys feel comfortable with? What are your rules? There isn't any right or wrong answer. It's just getting agreement. What do you guys want to do?
Yeah, that's great. I think for Ryan and I don't really feel like they're rules because that feels like, I don't know, like maybe a little harsher. I just feel like it's this, I was going to say unspoken, but I guess we have spoken about it. So maybe they are rules, but it's not,
Yeah.
I don't see it as
maybe we should call them your guardrails.
Guardrails,
right?
yeah.
They don't be rules, so it doesn't feel so
Yeah.
official.
This actually, I learned a lot of these when I was working on staff and ministry, but it was not having, not riding in a car with someone of the opposite sex, not having one-on-one meetings. And all of those I've really carried into our marriage, even being off staff. And I think it was like one time I needed to have a meeting at Starbucks with, somebody, and it, you knew, and I feel like I know half the coffee shop. So it was like, there were lots of people and it was fine. But we communicated and Ryan knew, but that's been great for us. I feel like it's just kind of taken any, I don't know, not opportunities. So just like, it's just been a guardrail, it just kind of keeps us on the up and up.
Right.
And I think there was one time too, where somebody might've been like, that seems extreme. Like, like, whatever, do you think they're going to like put a move on you, that person? And I'm like, but it's not even about that. It's just about like the principle of it all. It's about honoring Ryan.
Right.
And no, I'm not implying that they would, or that I don't think I would, I know I wouldn't. It's none of that, but I just don't want to get into that pattern. And, like we talked about earlier, putting the shoe in the door, the foothold, this is just how I choose to have a relationship.
Just do the work, right? Have that talk. Some couples are going to be like, oh, do you think this? Everyone's going to have different answers. That's okay. As long as the two of you are on the same page, know what you're doing, have talked about that, and have gone from there.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, Michelle, you talked a lot about that. I think the other thing is that really kind of hit me is this idea of no secrets. And I think that can go to a lot of different areas. I think we're actually going to jump into one here in a second. But one of the things that's very, I think, important to us is as we kind of flip into this topic of maybe technology, of just being very transparent with, we've said this on the show, like we both have each other's passwords. Like there's not anything that is secret there.
Yeah.
That if you want to check my phone at any point, go right ahead. Like you have the password to my phone, I have the password to your phone. And, oftentimes it's like, even just like, hey, Michelle, I just got like a message. Can you read it for me? Like, but having that just openness, and that's email, that's whatever it is, that just not having those secrets.
Yeah. Yep. Yeah. Good
and
point.
Cell
Ryan.
phone is a whole topic that we should talk about here for a second.
Yeah, please. Technology is a huge one.
Before we jump to that, I just want you guys to kind of remember is on 5 Minute Friday, I'm going to give you a whole list of some questions you need to ask for your rules. Like, can you meet at Starbucks? Can you meet at a bar? Can you meet here? Can you like so? Well, I don't want to give it all away.
Okay,
That's
all
the
right.
stuff going
That's
forward.
great.
Okay, 5 Minute Friday, yes.
If you're meeting with someone, the easy answer is you should always know, why are you meeting with that person?
Ooh, that's good.
What are you talking about? And for me, because I do have a lot of meetings, this is kind of the rule that I go is like, if my wife walks into Starbucks and sits down, would my conversation change at all?
Oh, yeah.
And the answer is no,
Right.
right? Because hopefully I've been doing this right, where she already knows who I'm talking to. She knows what I'm talking about. So if she walks into Starbucks, she's going to sit down and be able to go, hey, yeah, what's going on? And talking. Yeah. And there's no awkward silence. And so for me, that's kind of what I'm always going by. All right, if my wife walks in and sits down, would my conversation change at all? Probably not.
Yeah.
Because she already knows and goes, and she would actually be participating in that.
Yeah.
That's great. Tony, give us technology advice.
Okay. Yeah, the cell phone is the easy answer is yes, right? So someone goes, should my wife be able to look at my cell phone? Can I look at theirs? The answer should be yes. You should have nothing to hide. It should be really easy. Like you were talking about, hey, what's on my cell phone? Can you open my password? Could you read this one for me? There's no secrets. And so the short, easy answer is yes. But the important part is lots of couples will do that instead of having the conversation. So whenever somebody goes...
So like they would go check it.
Well, they would go, hey, can I check your cell phone? The easy answer is, yeah, sure. But the tougher question is, why are you asking that?
Yeah.
What's going on? What's happening? And, well, I'm feeling a little far away, or I don't know, or it feels a little awkward. The couples won't do that work.
Yeah.
Instead, they'll just go, can I see your phone? And they'll check, okay, and they hand their phone back, and they think everything's good. Everything is not good.
Yeah.
If you're asking to see your spouse's phone, you need to ask yourself, why are you doing that? And why can't you just ask and share the feeling, right? It's way more vulnerable, but it's way more positive to go, I'm feeling really far away from you. I'm feeling a little disconnected. I'm not quite sure what's going on. That's a way better question than, can I see your phone?
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, that's great.
Because the phone's too easy. You're like, sure, okay, but you never have that conversation then.
Yeah.
Right? And you never solve that feeling, and that's the tricky part.
Yeah, I think it's a really great point because really, truth be told, I hardly ever check your phone. I don't actually. I mean, if you ask me to get a message or something, or I might see it, but there's nothing leading me to wanting to like do an audit, you know? But so that's a great point, Tony. If someone's feeling like they need to, it's been a couple months now, but there was a gal that, you know, she knew we were doing a marriage podcast and she reached out and she was like, you know, I wanted to check my husband's phone when he was in the shower and he got a message and he's in communicating with an ex-girlfriend. And so I think of situations like that where it's like, oh, just like heart shattering for me. It's like, one, you know, she's feeling like she needs to check when he's in the shower. She doesn't want to confront him on it. But like, I think that kind of, we've talked about that before too. Like, then even with technology, who are you communicating with? Yeah. Like, are you communicating with exes? Are you friends with them on social? What is, I guess, maybe this goes back to what are your rules?
Yeah, what are your rules? And that's a good example of that story because you get to hear in your friend all those feelings like, oh, but the one thing she didn't feel safe in doing is asking him what's going on and are you talking to this person? Yeah. Right. Notice it's a little easier. Oh, nope, he's not. Okay, we're okay. Yeah. You actually are not. Yeah. Right? Because there's a little distance between you two if you're not doing that stuff.
Yeah. What is your advice then for couples? The first step then for the cell phones, is it going back to point number 3, just the rules? Like, hey, love, I was just like, what do you say? I was thinking we should share passwords or just have that conversation.
Can we talk about that?
Yeah.
Well, no. Why not? There may be all kinds of legitimate reasons, like, well, my work stuff's on here. Okay, well, can I look at this piece of it? Or why do you want to? What's your guys' rules? Because it's that being proactive. Let's have that fight on the front end instead of when everything goes bad, right? Because we talk about how we started the show is like if you're in an affair, if you're in one and you've just kind of discovered that, yes, you're going to be checking your spouse's phone a lot. That's a way to get that trust back and do that. But let's not start right there. Let's talk about and have that conversation on the front end of, do you share your passwords? Do you do that? I don't care as long as the two of you are on the same page and you know what that looks like.
Tony, there was one topic that we touched on briefly. Michelle, you talked about this. What does it look like? And maybe it's the same for social media.
Those are the rules you need to talk about, whether it's cell phone, is social media. Can you have an ex on your Facebook feed? Or on your Instagram, right? Another interesting one that I was just talking with a couple about is the wife was upset. He was liking one of a mutual friend's pictures, but one of them happened to be a bikini picture. And she kind of felt like, oh, that kind of crossed the line.
Yeah, sure. I don't like that.
He goes, I like everything she posts. Oh, okay. And they went back and looked, and sure enough, she's posting things about different stuff and different things. But for whatever reason, that one just felt a little different, which makes sense. But he wasn't necessarily trying. And when he goes, when we talked about it, he's like, yeah, that does kind of look bad or whatever. But she's our friend. We talk to her all the time. I'm just kind of liking everything.
Yeah.
Okay. And so that social media is like, is it okay to have those people on there? Can you have someone on your social media that you don't have? Or do couples say, nope, it's all the same, right? It's whoever you like, I need to like and follow. You just have to talk about that and figure out what that is. But those are all things you need to adjust and figure out.
Yeah, that's great advice, Tony. And I guess I'd be curious to know your answer on having, I guess I also think, what is going to be your best guardrail? So is having a friend or having somebody that's an ex, your friend, like, is that really in the best interest of your marriage? I don't know. Like, I don't really see what good it would do, but I don't know. Maybe there's a situation where, you're in some groups together or clubs or who knows. So
the easy answer is, what does your spouse think? Where are you at on that? Right? Because if it's a healthy, cool person, your spouse probably knows that person is communicating and it doesn't feel awkward and bad.
Sure.
If it feels awkward and weird to your spouse, that's kind of your answer. It's like, I don't want to make my spouse feel awkward and weird. Okay. And always kind of framing it from the perspective, remember where we talked about that guy, he's like, he quits smoking when he has to, when the world falls apart. right? If I would say to you, do you want that person on social media or do you want to be married? The guy usually goes, I want to be married.
Right.
But if I don't say it that way, and like,
Right.
well, why is she trying to control who I see? It's not that big a deal. And we go back and forth. It's like, all right, if you have to pick, who are you picking?
Yeah.
And the answer should be really easy. And when I phrase it that way, almost always he goes, yeah, I'm done. I don't need that. That's okay. I want her.
Right.
Yeah. And he didn't realize it was coming across that way. But yeah, it needs to be square with your spouse.
Yeah.
And having those tough, hard conversations.
Solid advice.
Yeah. And I don't mean to ruffle any feathers, but you can survive without it. Trust me, I don't have social media. But part of it is strategically, not necessarily for this reason, but I strategically said, like, I don't want to have a distraction, that I want to have a strong marriage. I want to have a strong family. Mm-hmm. That's my top priority. And so there's a lot of things that I feel like I personally eliminated in order to accomplish that, mm-hmm. and to have that be a focus. Where, hey, like, I don't want to have to deal with, I got all these friend requests coming in from people that I don't want to let that get in the way of what I want to do.
Yeah, and it makes your life simpler and easier.
Yeah.
What do you want to do? I want to love my wife, be a godly man, and be a dad.
Right.
Yeah.
All right, I'm going to do all that stuff first.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So.
Yeah, and not that I don't want those things, but I had to go back on. I was off for a while. I had to go back on for, I was in sales for a while and I needed to network and connect with people. Like that's where a lot of my customers were. And now in the marketing and advertising industry, it's
not bad.
Yeah.
You just gotta talk about it.
No, it's not bad at all. And
I should just get rid of it all though.
I'm not saying that. It's just like, if it is a distraction, Tony, I love what you said. Like, do you want to be married, or do you want, this? And whatever, put in whatever is distracting you from your marriage, or maybe causing you to look in a different direction, whatever that may be. You have to figure that out.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Tony, this has been such great advice. Do you have any final parting thoughts for our listeners?
Don't be afraid to do the hard work. We talked about this is a tough subject. It can get messy. It can get hurtful. It can get scary, right? If you think your spouse is talking with someone or doing that, or you're feeling a little disconnected, don't be afraid to do the hard work. It's always going to pay off. It's always going to be more beneficial if you do it on the front end than the back end. And so it will seem scary. You don't know quite the answer, what's going to happen, but that's probably the biggest thing that I see in therapy in any subject, with any couple coming in, is they've been avoiding doing stuff and pretending everything's been okay when it hasn't been.
Thank you so much for being here today, Tony. It's a really important conversation.
Yeah. Thanks for inviting me. I like to be a friend of the show.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you to our listener. Thank you for investing in this time, and we are here alongside you. So please reach out at Celebrate.church/marriage. You can reach out on our Instagram, Celebrate MarriageCast. You can reach out via our text number, which is 605-951-0110. We would love to connect with you. And we will be back on 5 Minute Friday, as Tony said, with an assignment for you to help you kind of walk through those boundaries and guardrails. So we hope that you have a great week, and thanks for joining us today. Bye.